In a legal decision described as the first of its kind in Canada, a Halifax sex worker successfully sued a client for non-payment of services. Former sex worker Brogan Sheehan took Bradley Samuelson to small claims court. This was after he didn't fully pay her fee, which both parties had agreed to beforehand. Mr. Samuelson argued that the agreement was invalid because it is illegal to purchase sexual services. But court adjudicator Daryl Pink said that the contract could still be enforced and awarded Ms. Sheehan $1,800. Sex work remains criminalized in Canada, but a 2014 law removed criminal penalties for people like Ms. Sheehan who sell sexual services. Paying for sex, however, remains illegal. Well, joining us now to discuss the case and its implications is attorney Jessica Rose, the lawyer that represented Ms. Sheehan in this case. Ms. Rose, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you for having me, Nima.
Now, before we really dive into this case, can you give us an idea of the current conditions and the economic realities of sex work in Canada and how the legal system is impacting both workers and clients alike?
Sure. Well, I think this is probably a really understudied area, and understandably, people are hesitant to come forward, both sex workers and clients, to share what their real lived experiences are of being involved in sex work. But we know anecdotally that many of our clients come forward and tell us there are many times I haven't been paid for my work. And it just doesn't seem to be a very unusual thing. It's seen right now as being just one of the things that sex workers have to deal with in their industry on a regular basis, which is concerning.
And in this case, this ruling is being called the first of its kind. So, what does this ruling mean for the legitimacy of sex work in Canada, maybe in the future from a legal perspective?
Well, we hope this is the first of many cases. This is a precedent-setting case as far as we're aware. This is the first time that this issue has come before a court in Canada. But certainly we know, as I mentioned before, that this happens frequently enough that there are many sex workers who could bring their case and succeed. Now that we have this precedent that they can turn to, and they can say, we know that this has been accepted by a Canadian court now, that a contract for sex work is enforceable. And so we hope that this has really opened the floodgates for sex workers to be coming forward and using the courts to enforce their rights.
And as you say, this is a precedent-setting case. So how do you see this impacting maybe future cases of similar circumstances involving sex workers?
Well, now that there is a framework for this, and we hope to be really spreading the gospel as an organization, along with Brogan, our client, who's very passionate about this issue and is herself a peer mentor and an advocate. So, we hope to be taking this message on the road and showing other people in the industry, other organizations that support sex workers, here's the template for how you can bring this kind of a case. And it's actually quite straightforward, especially using the small claims court process. It's meant for lay people to bring forward their cases without legal assistance. So it's meant to remove a lot of those barriers that prevent people from using the civil justice system in terms of it being too expensive, complex, onerous. So we hope that really small claims court is an avenue for sex workers all across the country to be able to bring forward their claims and get paid.
And maybe for a broader perspective, do you think this case may have opened the door for a conversation around the legalization of sex work in Canada, ma'am?
We really hope so. I think it's a long overdue conversation, and a lot of advocacy groups have been warning the government for some time of this gap in the law, this gap among others for sure, in saying that the economic rights of sex workers have really been left behind in these, in the changes that Parliament enacted about a decade ago now. And not to say that safety, security, these are important issues as well, but economic rights and being able to enforce contracts for their work is really absent in the current legislation. It's a huge void. So this is an opportunity to get that conversation going and get some legislative amendments that really speak more squarely to this issue and try and fill that gap.
All right, Ms. Rose, a quick 30 seconds left here, but what would the ideal legal framework around sex work in Canada look like?
That's a big question. I think at the very least, what sex workers should be entitled to is just the ease of accessing the civil justice system in the same way that a carpenter or a lawyer would if someone didn't pay their fees. And the fact that we had to go to court in order to try and decide this issue, get a court to comment on this issue of whether or not a contract for sex work is enforceable, just like any other contract for services, it illuminates the very problem that the legislation presents, which is that it's just silent.